All right, what I'll do for this part, the rest of this part, until lunchtime, I'll just show you some of our example internal assessment tasks and some sample student responses to the internal assessment tasks. And then hopefully you'll be able to see how that's integrating into the external. I'll also show you the external tasks that I gave the student and some sample, I gave our students and some sample responses. So hopefully, put this all together. So, digital information. This is the one where they have to create the survey. This is, I'm sure, last year's task. I've just modified it slightly in the fact that we were just talking, I added the Google Docs component. Last year they actually created their survey in Microsoft Word and gave them out by hand on paper, then fed that into their database and then created the mail merge document. Because I discovered the wonders of the Google Docs form, which I thought was so cool, I thought, oh, well, you know, it's all about digital information, it's all about that integration of data and that sort of seamless integration of data. So they designed their surveys in Google Docs, and if you haven't gone into Google Docs to see, if you go to Google Docs and just say create new form, it lets you have text, boxes, check boxes, multi-choice. You can have it go to another page based on certain questions that were answered. And then it collates. Then you send out a link at the end, and of course the students love it because they can put their own theme on it. So there's 100 different themes or 97 different themes that they can use. And then at the end, you can just email out that link, or you can put it on your school's wiki if you have one or whatever, and then people fill it in, it collates it into a Google Docs spreadsheet, which then they can download into Excel. And I used that opportunity to show them how to match up the fields in Excel to their database fields. And then they had to create an import document. So it was just made, this year's task just had a little bit different flavor to it. And actually, I said, I don't mind, as long as you can justify why. You can make a paper survey and you can key it in. You're showing me skills in Word, you're showing me your design skills in Word, or you can do Google Docs. All of them chose to do Google Docs, but they did have that opportunity. So anyway, as part of our task, these were the instructions that they're going to be writing their own computer game, and that they need to find out what people's computer game preferences are. So that was basically their brief, and they had their requirements. They had to have the survey, the database, and the mail merge document. Now, I guess this is key. We do have them plan out their steps beforehand. I do have in there, note, your planning will not be assessed because it's not assessed as part of 1.41, as part of the digital information internal. It's not formally assessed, but by having them sort of plan out the steps, and I ask them questions in their planning like, what software do you want to use? What key features of the software might you want to use? They're starting to think along the lines of the external, so that helps that. And then while you're working on the task, keep evidence of what you did, why you did it, when you did it. Again, just little screenshots. Some of them in my class this year wanted to go overboard and file open, screenshots. I said, I don't want to see all of that. I don't want to mark it. I said, just do some relevant screenshots to show me why you selected a particular feature. For example, a screenshot of your query criteria. So why was that helpful to write that query? Or a screenshot of your database fields and the field types that you selected. I didn't want to see that they created file new database. I don't need every single step there. And annotate it, and using good file and folder management. So I usually give them these little task checklists for their internals, and see, that's the planning. What questions, sketch your design layout, what software will you use and why, So they're starting to think about justification of software applications. And that's where I'm saying that external content is embedded secretly into their internal. What techniques or features of the software will you use to create it, and testing procedures, because that's actually part of the 141 internal. You know, they have to show that they've thought of some testing procedures. And then they implement that, create it, give it out. Same thing with the database. So I give them these little step-by-steps. They have to think about what kinds of fields they might need. Sketching their design layout. That's where they use those grid books. And then they create it. And they enter their data. What database tools or techniques and features will you use to analyze your data? And again here, I'm asking them, all of them come up with different queries. Some of them thought that a filter would be a better option for a particular, for something. Some thought sorting. I can sort them this way, I can filter it. So they're picking the tool and technique that they want to use. For the internal, I'm getting some justification from them. You know how you have to say, did they do it skillfully, did they do it efficiently? They're screenshotting what they selected to do and to use, and I can make some judgments for their internal assessment whether they've used the most efficient tool for the job. So for example, if all of their field types are text in their database, well, they can't be because I give them a minimum requirement of different field types. But for example, if the lookup wizard in Access would have been a better choice to help make it more efficient and to help make the data more accurate, but they've just made it a plain old text field and they've put that down. That helps me make that justification for their grade for their internal. When they are screenshotting and saying why they did a particular query or why they did a filter or why they picked a field type, then they're also helping to get those tools and techniques for their external, so the key features of the software, but that justification at the end. Why is this a good software package for this particular thing? So why is using Access much better to analyze this data than Excel? They start learning that. And then they do their mail merge document. Again, they'll be telling me, hopefully, why creating a mail merge is better than typing each individual letter by hand for their internal, why that's a more efficient process. They had to make a query for their final stakeholders. Now some of them, I'm sure I haven't marked it, but some of them may have just connected their mail merge to their whole table and only printed off certain ones, and I'll see this year when I'm marking it. I think a few of them did that last year. That's not the most efficient. They're supposed to have their mail merge connected just to their query of their final stakeholders, so they only have those particular people in their mail merge. By having them screenshot some of those things, I can make judgments on their internal, but it's also leading towards their external. And these are the specifications for our internal, and you have copies of these if you so choose. Now, this is an example of what this is an example. This is from last year. So again, this was the word survey from last year's. This girl has highlighted some of her key features that she's used and why. So contrasting is used, making the heading and subheading show different two elements are not the same. Alignment was used. Headings and subheadings were saved as a quick style. So she's showing me some of the features, and then she's actually gone into why she used it and justifying that. So if you can see here, just from this snippet, I used Word to make my survey because it was more efficient than any other program, because I could use things like quick styles, alignment, kerning. I used the quick style to make my work efficient because a click of the mouse I was able to change the text to be exactly like a heading or subheading. I used alignment to make them right aligned so they had different alignment because we were talking about contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity a lot in this one, kerning, etc., etc. So she's given a lot of reasons in here for using Word to do this particular one and relating her reasons to the key features of the software, which can you see that this would be an ideal thing for her to pick out for the external, for justifying use of a software for a particular task.
Just ask one thing. This isn't part of the internal, so if they chose not to do this, they couldn't be penalised because the internal is the task.
The internal is the task. Actually, well, if this is there showing me why they should get. I basically remember Josh Campbell.
Yeah.
He came to do a workshop for our group a few years ago and said, I make my students bid for their grades. Basically, they have to prove to me why they deserve a merit or an excellence. So I do set it up this way. This is part of the task that they turn in, that they have to show me what they did that made them skillful and efficient. Now, if and it saves me, and this is my own take on the internal. I don't want to walk around behind them with a clipboard saying, "Show me what you did in there to make that efficient." So I don't stand behind them the whole time. Of course, I'm walking around and monitoring them, but I don't have a tick list and say, "Show me this, show me this." I kind of do the "prove it to me" route. Now, if I do have kids like this one girl who had really low literacy because of her dyslexia, if I look at it and I need to ask her some questions, I'll do some verbal feedback with her. And most of them, some of them didn't write this much, but they had enough in their snippets that they showed me why they selected those things. So I do that as part of my internal assessment. They do have to turn in this write-up. They get, but that is a choice, and that is not required. That's not required by the standard itself. So much as, but for me, it's my way of knowing why they made the choices that they made and what choices they used. Instead of, I think, well, I've seen a few internals for 1.41 floating around, and I think they're quite prescriptive when I look at them. And I think, how do you differentiate between merit or excellence if you're saying you have to do this, then this, then this, then this? I find, for me, as a teacher, I would find that harder. So I make it a little bit more open-ended, say, design this survey, and then show me what what features you used and why. So it's kind of
actually, they do have to do something like this, because I know we just marked it as well, and then it's one of those things where you have to say, why did you use Word?
Right.
Why did you use Excel?
Yeah.
What were the features you were looking for?
Right.
So they do actually have to do something.
Unless
like
you, the only other thing is to have a checklist yourself and either interview them or checklist behind them, because you will have to present evidence for the moderator of why you made those decisions, why they were skillful or efficient. And so you'll either have to have a checklist or something like this. So I figured I can turn that into the moderator and they can read that.
I just had my moderator, this particular standard, and I overdone it, basically. I asked them to give me evidence on data integrity and stuff like that, proofreading stuff like that, and got them to list all those things down. The moderator said, I don't have to do that. I can just do that by wandering around and seeing that they're doing their own work and stuff like that. Everything that they were given was, the text was given to them. They just had to plop it into all the right places, create charts, what have you. And I got them to do a small paragraph at the end of a little bit of composition to summarise the whole letter basically that they were doing. And he said I didn't need to do that either. That was just over the top. And yes, I didn't do any of this at all. But I did, after the internal, then discuss, why we used it, and then I got to write that up. But it wasn't part of the assessment. So I just got to tweak it, make it less hard. So, and I just had a checklist.
And I've had feedback on this from the moderators that this is good.
Yeah.
But also, because this leads in to our generic assessment that they're doing on their prototype development. So some of the writing that they're doing, like their survey, is leading into their generic overall developing their prototype. But I think with the moderators, we just had a best practice workshop in Dunedin a couple of weeks ago on our Jumbo Day. And I think what they're saying is if you want to do this, it's okay. If you want to have a checklist, but you still have to, you then have to provide that evidence of how you made your judgments.
And I think it depends what task they're doing.
Yes.
Like for me, I did word processing and spreadsheets, and so it's easy with spreadsheets as to which formula is more efficient.
Yes.
So, I felt as though, in fact, to be honest, I never thought of having to do that, because to me that was external.
Right.
But I can see with the database, maybe you do need to separate out your nutrition.
Right. Yeah. And also, again, I've done this because then they have all this. They basically have all the information they need to produce their external report based on their internals. They just look back through all of their write-ups and sort of summarize them and put them together. So that was my approach, and that's what they did. They just opened up their internals and their notes and kind of made the report based on that.
Do you mark all these holistically or in separate? You've got about 8 different evidence statements and plans and marking schedules for each different bit, or?
Oh, you mean for the survey? I just do the word and the database for their internal. I'm just looking at what they've done in Word and what they've done in the database, and then I kind of put those together holistically. Yeah, but each one, like this is just 141, and then it ends. And the girls were saying, just this group who just finished this, they said, "Oh, do we have to have all our survey results?" And I said, so this is that they've already done their mail merge letter, and they've given it out now to their stakeholders, and they're worried that they haven't got all their feedback from their stakeholders yet. I said, no, that's the next one. We're doing that next time. Don't worry. This one's ended, so that's ended. Done. And then we start now the prototype development. Yeah, but no, I don't do it as one big thing. This is just the Word database skills. But again, I'm looking at all of the skills, and she did say what testing. I had Amelia do a practice survey, reading over, filling it out. I use spelling and grammar check and take testing procedures, and so and then she's showing me some of her database. This is not all. Believe me, they didn't all write this much. She's saying why the different fields that she chose and why she chose those different field types. Like, I chose this because, let's see, I had 3 lookup wizard fields shown as text fields in the screenshot. I chose this because I had these as multi-choice questions. Lookup wizard was the best option for this because it was the most efficient way of putting all my options in. I only had, that I had as answers, and being able to choose only one of them was chosen answer. A lot of my questions was yes, no. I was planning to use a lookup wizard, but found yes, no would be more efficient. So she's written those things. Again, for the internal, I can see her thought process. A yes, no was more efficient than a lookup wizard. She knows she's picked the most efficient field type. For her external, she can then use this to talk about features. So a feature of Access versus Excel is that you can use these different data types. And I know one of the girls, she wrote a really good thing in her external about one of the best things about Access is the different data types, and so you can have a data type that's specific to the information that you need, and it's storing it more efficiently on the computer. Like, she actually took on board all of that. She was an excellent student. The other students might just say there are different data types that you can have, and you can use forms to make input your data more efficiently. And that was her form write-up. So I do have them write it up, and I can say, and I know you're saying, oh, my students won't do that, and they do cringe a bit. Some of the girls cringe, but as they're making their things, I'll just say, screenshot that important thing, and just put it into a screenshot file. Write a little comment. Some go over the top, write a lot more. Some just write enough. But as long as I get their flow of what they're thinking, and I know why they selected that, that really, it makes my marking of their internals really easy. But again, it makes the process for them to write the external that much easier for them. Yeah.
It certainly demonstrates evidence that they've been through the process.
Yes.
And I think that's the key thing here, is that, as I keep saying to the kids, you need to show me how you thought. What was your thinking? What was your process of doing it? Because even with the programming, it's the same sort of thing. Document what you're doing. I need to know how you got from here to here. What did you do?
And and the same thing that some of our same students, and my sons, both being one of them, said, I don't want to show how I'm doing this in maths. And their maths assessments now are all about how they did it.
Explain why you thought
Explain
like
why,
that.
yes. That's all the new math assessments are like that. And so we're not the only ones. And then you can see she's even done some screenshots, and she's talking about her backup and file management procedures, which is part of the 141 internal anyway, because it talks about efficient file and folder management. So they did some screenshots. This also leads up into the external. What are file and folder management procedures that you should be using, conventions of file and backup? So she says, while doing it, I backed up my work on my USB and to my personal laptop to ensure I had backup copies in case the school computers or school network crashed. I also used file management, organizing my files in an efficient way that was easy, and then she just did some screenshots of that. So she's got some of that evidence already in there. And then this is our media, which I won't go. Again, it follows a very, very similar format, and I won't read all of it to you. But they had the brief that they had to create their original logo and a multi-page different. Last year, we let them choose. They could do their DVD, CD box packaging, a game instruction manual, or a review article for a gaming magazine on their game. So they could do any of those desktop published documents, but they had to create their own logo and artwork to insert into those. What we found, I had 3, out of both classes, we had 3 pick the gaming magazine article, 2 pick the instruction manual, and everybody else picked the DVD box thing. So this year, just my colleague and I have decided we'll just have them do that because it's the most popular, and it makes a great display. Talk about their choices for next year. We put all their DVDs out, and they were all making their option choices in the year 9s and 10s. Were walking by, going, "Ooh, I want to take digital tech. I get to make DVD game boxes."
Subversive.
Yes. So that was just our specifications of what they had to have. Copyright, again, this copyright and original content, which is part of the internal for digital media anyway. So we talked about that, and the design elements, and their testing and evaluation, and etc. Again, evidence. While you're working, keep evidence of what you did, annotated screenshots, decide the best way to keep track of it, and we said they could use a visual diary, digital notes, project log. So that's, and we had them do some research first. So we do have them, like they had to look at different game art. We gave them copies out of PC Gamer for gaming magazines and article reviews, and also I just brought in a bunch of old Xbox games from my sons, and we looked at game manuals. So they looked at existing solutions and analyzed those. That wasn't assessed, but it helped them to come up with their design concepts that they wanted. And
so sorry, just go back to the screenshots with that, Judy. That's actually bringing quite a lot to the external, isn't
it is, yeah. So identify the features of the software. That's what we do for every internal. We basically embed them writing towards the external. And because they are quite open-ended, you'll see with this game box, well, all of them, they had to design their own logo. They had to design their game box or their magazine article last year or whatever it was. None of them picked the exact same tools and techniques from Illustrator. It was all quite original. So when they talked about it in their external, it wasn't an issue of me thinking that, Vilna is copying Patrick's ideas here or writing about Patrick. So they had to justify those, explain those tools and the features of the software and justify why they picked that application. So yes, again, you just have them do that throughout. Final testing, printing, follow outcome. So I hope, I'm sure I have on here I have a photo of their final game, I'll find it. So here she's describing, those were her ideas, game squirrel, game nut, game nuts, and she thought about how she could incorporate them, and she's made some design decisions. And the spaceman, and she's showing some of her first and final attempts and why she's picked the different things and the gradients that she's made, and she made her own little G rating logo and what tools she used, and the triangle tool, and she even made her little barcode. And then she's showing her process of going through Illustrator and transferring them, because you have to do that for the internal. And that's her final cover that she made. And she's telling me why she picked those. File management. She's talking about her file management procedures, which again can be incorporated. She's talking about, once I had completed my final game cover, I saved the document as PDF, so I was able to print it without the pictures or anything moving around. It also made it non-editable for anyone else to use. Protection and authenticity of my work. To save it in Design as PDF, I did this. So, that compare and contrast file types for different purposes and why you have something as a different, it's all here. They know that. Going into the external, they know why they have an executable file. They know why they should make a PDF file. They know why they should use an AI file. They know why they should have a docx file. They've written it all already, so they just have to take those snippets out. And then she's shown that process. And this was just how she met the specifications. With her testing procedure and some references. So, again, I have some good evidence to make judgments for the internal, and they've got some good information for the external, all built in. I might just...
Julie, I'm just thinking there's a lot of time involved in this, and I can see it with my programming kids as well. That documentation takes time.
It does.
But it is important for them. Yeah.
It is... I think when they, especially this group who's now in year 12, they do see that they do see
second nature.
Yeah, and they do see that it was really important for helping them for the external. Like, I know they grumbled at, I want to do the documentation, I just want to do it. But it's true, most kids, they just want to do. But if you can see, I've got most of them to be thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and it's just embedding that knowledge. Whereas if they just click, try, they forget.
Yeah.
And so they've had to actually go back. And I found it with my year 10s, and we were discussing about the year 10 program. We had gone through a bunch of Word practice exercises and Excel practice exercises, and then when I said, let's brainstorm some key features of Word and key features of Excel, and I'll go screenshot them, I found half of them said, well, what's the filter again? What's the, they had actually forgotten, even though we did about 10 exercises, and I said, look at that particular exercise and see if you can remember what that was about, and then they just wrote a little screenshot and a write-up. So it does really help reinforce their learning.
I've got my boys in my class at the moment, so level 1, and we're doing a gaming, building a gaming computer, and they're loving it. But when I asked them that question, what are the key features in Word, what's the key feature? What does that mean? And so they had no idea. And so when we started looking at it, and we went through all the programs, and they did screenshots, and they labelled them, they made a beautiful job of it. And so they used all the key features to make it, it was amazing. So once they really got into that, they understood what I meant. So I could now say to them, what's the key feature? They know exactly what I'm talking about.
And it's that literacy, it's the literacy component that you are reinforcing as well, right? Because if they just get this external task that you give them and say, talk about the key features of software applications, they will say, what's a key feature? Even though they've used a million key features, they won't know. We know what a key feature is, but if they've heard that word all year long, it's second nature to them. I just brought up this. Those were they're ending their game boxes. I just went down to Video Easy and they sold me old game box covers for 50 cents each. And so they actually printed them and put them inside that. And that was my class out, and those were some of the magazine, the 2-page spreads that they did. And for the digital media assessment, to make the things fit inside the game boxes and also on their little CDs, that's quite a bit for accuracy and for that, for the merit criteria, because it actually has to fit just right. They've got to get the spine measurements, they've got to get a lot of measurement, so that helps with that. But as you can see, every single one of their outcomes is totally different. Their own logos, all of that, and it was all, they all did most original work. Some of them went so far as to reproduce the GameMaker logo themselves or the Windows logo. Some of them wanted a Windows logo on there, and so we got the correct use for Windows logos, and they put that in their documentation. So as long as they made their own logo and their own artwork, if they had picked a few things off the internet where it was either Creative Commons or that they had permission and they sourced it properly, they could add those things in. But most all of that is just their own work, and they loved it. And this is why I said I put that just outside, just during when they're making the course choices. And the girls were actually quite happy to show everybody else what they had just finished. So I thought that worked really well. And I won't go into my, I should. This was planning and brief development. This wasn't assessed at all. Initial brief. This was a totally non-assessed task, and I just put this in here because everything you do, we think everything we do has to be formally assessed.
Teach more.
And for their game, I wanted them to just work on developing a brief for their game, storyboard it out, do a bit of flow charting of how their objects would interact, but I didn't want to assess yet another thing. As you can see, I have a lot of full-on assessments anyway, but I wanted them to go through that thinking process, and I gave them some feedback about that before they went on. So this was just their brief development, and we said that their game had to have multiple rooms, contain multiple objects, have some way for the player to interact, have a title. So those were some of the things that we gave them as their criteria, and then it had to meet their stakeholders' requirements. And I put in here, it's not part of it, but it leads into their developing their game. So they had thought about their game, they had their flow chart, they had their storyboards, they knew what they were going to program up. Kind of like in the new programming assessments, it's not specifically, but they had sort of the planning part of it done. I didn't assess it formally, so some of them, when they showed me their flow charts for their objects, and I said, this will never end. What happens here? Then they could go back and think about that they had never thought of a way for that, collision detection or loop or whatever to ever end. So I did that without formally assessing it, but then that helped them think about their programming. Also, it helped them think about their prototype development. And another infamous task checklist. I think kids do like checklists because then they think, I finished that, I've done that. So this was just on their game ideas and environment. But I think, I put this in as well. What software will you use? What sprites and graphics, what music, what objects do you require? How will they interact with each other? So again, they're already thinking about that for their external. And you might say, I know that this question came up, I think, at the best practice workshop. Well, if you've only taught them one software, they don't really have a choice in their justification or a choice in their selection. But our girls did have exposure to Alice. They all did Alice at year 10 as part of just their module. They did Scratch in year 9. So they saw GameMaker, and they were able to say why GameMaker is a step above and why that allows them more flexibility in their game development than something like Scratch or Alice. So for the external, they were actually able to make a justified decision in that. So flow charting, they had to flow chart each object and then write up a final brief, and then they use that final brief to then develop their game. And this is one where we did your question about a combined one, and I haven't had this particular thing moderated. Or no, I think this was okay. Never mind, I take that back. Because I did combine, I was really worried. I combined 1.4 and 1.46 into one task. But we were very, very, very explicit. You'll see later on. See in this? Decide upon the software and hardware you use to develop your game. Document your selection and reasons. That goes towards 1.4. That's prototype development. Research the sprites, sounds, backgrounds you will need through trialing, 1.4. All that beginning stuff was 1.4. Create your game objects, create each event and objects and add relevant code. That's 1.46. So as the students were going through, they knew which part of each thing would be assessed against 1.4 or 1.46. And I had two different schedules. So I had 1.4 and 1.46 schedule. And I think there's one thing that, no, there isn't one thing that's both. And we said, so for 1.4, they would be assessed on their selection and use of resources, their application of techniques, and their evaluation of its fitness for purpose. And for constructing the program, the ability to create and test a computer program, the skill and efficiency with the confines of the programming language and their construction. So, actually, if you so choose to go into a generic, prototype development is really good for digital media and also for computing, because there's a lot of testing and trialing, which you have to do anyway. In the prototype development, the whole standard is about selecting things based on testing and trialing, and in computing you might be, and in programming, sorry, you might be, it's all that that embedded testing of your code, and in digital media you might be trialing different techniques and seeing which one works. Seem to work well to go together. And see, that's where she's saying, like, I've decided to use that for Mac. This is because the later they're available, maybe it'll be improved version. she talks about differences with Scratch and why she's picked it. She's going to use Photoshop to edit her sprites and backgrounds. And so she's made some justifications there on her software selections, which again are going to help her to produce her external report. And this is actually, I won't go through this is her trialing of her sprites. She did a lot of research into what she wanted, and she finally ended up drawing them because she didn't like any of the choices. This is all for the prototyping, so I won't go through all of that, but you have it on there.
Julie, just a comment, I'm just thinking, because I know it's like in the programming, I say with the kids, you've actually got to keep this going all the time. Some of them think, oh, I'll do this at the end, and
Yes.
you can't do
No.
it at the end. You actually got to process as you go through. And it is a training, it's a discipline, isn't it?
You know, if you look, I'll go back with any of these. This is what helps. See that teacher sign off? I do have them do that, and they just say, that I sign that off. Creating it. So when they've done that and they've created it, I'll say, where are your screenshots of creating your database? Have you done that? Okay. So they don't go then they don't get all the way to the end and think, oh, I'm going to go back and try to remember what I did or why. So that's why I have this little teacher sign off box. So they check off, move on to the next step, check off, move on to the next step. So that helps them to keep that going all the time. And they do polish it up before they turn it in, but I look in that they're going through the process and they're not waiting till the very, very, very end to try to do that. And that's the other reason I have that. So I just made those little things. They can kind of look there, and then they just show me that section, and I just do a little sign off. That's again for me, that's my monitoring technique while they're working on their assessment task. They'll be saying, oh, I'm ready for this part to be signed off. I said, okay, show it to me. Well, then I know that A, they're working on it, but B, they don't suddenly come to the end and have this miraculously finished document that I haven't seen them do any of during the whole process. So that's just my other way of knowing that it's authentic and that they've been working on it all along themselves. But instead of standing behind them and checking off every little checkbox, I just initial as, and I usually have a pretty good idea by the time they turn it in, if they're sitting at achieved merit or excellence or not achieved.
With them having their own laptop and being able to take them home, how much of it is done at home, and how can you guarantee that it's their work?
That's a good question. Probably because it's quite unique to them, and they've had to do all the planning first, and I see what they're writing out and I see them doing it. You know what I mean? I see them do a lot of it during class anyway, and none of them miraculously ever come back with a heap more that's done that they haven't planned or that they didn't know how to do. I suppose it's with that, it's like that though in anything digital.
We use exam drives when they're making the games, their final games, and for other things as well, which sort of stops that.
Right.
Taking away and giving help and whatever.
You can actually pick up a lot of these as well, because it comes back with some wonderful language that you think, oh, this is really their work. And I know what someone has done is that they kind of delete part of the code and they say, right, now what actually did you do to go from here to here? And if they haven't done it, they can't put those extra lines in.
And the
So
same
there is a way, I mean, but I think you pick up. I think it's just your own professional judgment. You will pick up it. I mean, I know we had a kid who handed work in and I said, oh, this is, I said, I haven't even taught you this. How do you know how to do this? Oh, I know it. I said, okay, explain to me. And then he admitted, no, someone else had done it. So you can, you will actually pick it up. And I think, yes, they do some work at home and some here. But like you, we also have an exam drive when they're doing the practical. So I don't mind if they discuss with themselves outside. In the end, they still have to do their own. And in the real world, you do talk to your colleagues, but you still have to do your own.
And for pretty much for our game development, each one's developed, they're doing their own game idea. So as they're going along, everybody's is working a little bit differently, so they can't just copy somebody else's code. And I do let them use their Game Maker book, so if, they just have to figure out how to apply it to that situation. And I know I had a girl the same thing. I said, how'd you figure out how to do this? This isn't in the book. And we did. She did tell me. She said, I went home and I watched some YouTube videos from Yo-Yo Games had put out to figure out how to do it. And I said, great, document that. I said, that shows that you're doing your own research and your own initiative. That's great. But I checked her because I thought we never went over an example like that.
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't mind that. Yeah.
Ask a question about your school labs are Windows-based and the students have got Macs.
Right.
Why, for the database section, did you choose to do Access when at home?
Right, and that's why they're all doing the database on Access. Next year, I mean, they're all doing it right in front of me because they can't go home and do it because it's on Windows, so I've seen all of their database work. But that is a really good question, and the girls said, oh, we wish we had Access so that we could do some more practice and things at home, and we are looking into licenses for FileMaker Pro. Yeah, just so that it's totally seamless. Right now, in this transition phase, we still have these Windows labs, but we're having, I was just saying to Vilna at the beginning, we're having two new purpose-built computer labs next year. And what we're going to do, I think, this is the plan anyway, they'll come in with their laptop. They're just going to plug their laptops into a monitor. So we're just going to keep the monitors in our current lab, the big screen monitors. We'll get them a Mac keyboard and mouse, have them there, and they'll just plug it in. And so basically we won't have any more hard drives anymore. The only thing is I wanted them to have big screen monitors because the teachers, we get bigger ones, but the students get the little 13-inch ones. And in digital tech, especially if they're doing media, they need bigger screens. The other thing is they figured out that to preserve battery power, they turn their screens on to really, really dim, and they're sitting there like this. And I said, oh, I told my ear-to-ear, I said, this is so unergonomic. I hate it. I hate every minute of it. I said, I can't wait. So the lease is up on our Windows machines after this term. We'll have finished any database work we're doing, and then everything else is quite generic. So we're going to send back the boxes. We're just going to buy the monitors off the lease, and I'm going to pilot that with my classes. And then next year we'll have just those labs set up like that. And that's why we have to we have to get licensing for FileMaker because we won't have Windows anymore in our lab environment. And I'm also looking to get, by the way, I'm trying to get designed a sort of boomerang shape unit so that I can see their monitors from here, and then they can turn and write and face me when we're doing stuff on the data projector, and they'll have room for their books, so it's just a little bit more. Does that make sense? So like the screen would be there, and then they'll have a little shape here where they can turn and take notes, and we can do discussion. And then I can see at a glance all of their screens to make sure they're not on whatever, Facebook, somehow through some proxy server. So that's my plan. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but we definitely are getting rid of the boxes, our own hard drives. And also we decided that they are digital citizens. They all had to get a portable hard drive, and they're supposed to be backing up their work themselves every night. So the onus is off us for keeping all of their backups. Okay, so to the external. So our goal for our external, and believe it or not, you know that I I don't want to be too disparaging. You know the task that was on NZQA last year about creating the recipe book that people weren't happy with, and I can see lots of reasons why. I downloaded that and I modified it to make my own task, and I got the point from looking at it. What they were trying to do is get students to reflect on their digital information concepts while they were creating the recipe book. But I think how it was written made it sound like the assessment was of the recipe book itself, and I thought it was very confusing, and I'm not plugging that at all. I'm just leave it at that. However, from that, I did download that and I modified it, and that's how I came up with this idea that, oh, I'll just have the students reflect on all of their internal assessments. So I used that as the seed for my idea for the assessment task. So the goal was to get them to reflect on their year's work and how they applied the concepts. And as we've just now discussed, authenticity was not a huge issue because they had to discuss their own work processes and understandings. And we used the end of year exam time to help with our rigor and authenticity. So that was this was the task. So I basically said, during Level 1 Digital Tech, you've completed these 3 major projects: their game survey, database mail merge, the game prototype, the logo, marketing materials, and while creating them, they've been developing their understanding of basic concepts of information management. In your visual diary and digital files, you have recorded your notes, documented your research, and for this assessment, you are to create a report which discusses your understanding of basic concepts as applied to the development of your Level 1 digital technology projects this year. And I've said what it can include. So you can kind of see that I was building them up to this all along. And conditions, individual, you have 1 week of out-of-class time to organize your notes and ideas. So I gave them this the week before exams, like before they went on their exam week. I said, this is going to be your exam, so this is your studying. Organize yourself. Organize your notes. Think about what you're going to say. They were not to come in with a report written, though. They just could start looking at, some of them hand wrote out some notes, some of them created an outline of what they wanted to say. You have 3 hours during the exam to write your draft. You will have 3 periods of supervised class time to create your final report, which will be sent off for marking. And then, so they're planning, and I said individual task, evidence must be your own work, and I had them consider the following. So, in relation to their 3 digital technology projects, what was their selection of software? Why was it necessary to complete their projects? What were the features that were key to developing those projects? And as you can see, most of them could look back on their internal notes that they had turned in and say, oh yeah, I used this, I used that, this is why I picked that. What were the operating key features that they accessed during the creation of those projects, both on their laptops and the school network, and any similarities or differences? Interactions between the operating system and the application software, and similarities or differences. File management considerations, the file types that they used and why they serve different purposes, and ethical issues. So that's what they were supposed to be thinking about. And then that was writing their report. And even this, you think, oh, this looks kind of templated. They didn't even write it in this order. None of them wrote, it was very random. Some started with operating systems, started with application software. They started with ethical issues. They did it any which way they felt like they wanted to organize their report. So I didn't have all of them with a heading that just said, first application software, then identify key features. It was funny. They all sort of did it in their own way. But these were the bullet points. So identify the application, explain the purpose, describe the key features, justify your selection, identify operating system software, explain the purpose, describe key features, explain. That's just basically, these are bullet points from the standard. File management. file types, ethical issues, and then submit it. So that was the actual task that they had. This is one of mine that came marked as an A. This girl's a bit over the top. She's actually... I was reading it again last night in preparation for this, and she's in my level 2 class. I think she will be, I don't know, she'll be some really cool designer of something. She's the one with her tablet permanently attached to her hand. She actually, I was shocked and amazed. I never read this because she's semi-disorganized. So I only read her first draft. I never read her final draft because she just printed it, put it in the envelope, and it was like off. She's the one who sketches and doodles and draws all over the place, but she created amazing things. She's really smart. When I read it, I went, wow, you listened to me the whole year. But see, she's started with her application software, and as you can see, this is nothing like the notes that we took in our notes document. It's important in order for a computer to carry out tasks that the user requires. The operating system runs the application as on its own. The computer cannot do much. Also, different users have different requirements for application software. For example, accountants would use Excel often because the application can do calculations, tables and graphs, but a graphics designer would probably not use it very much at all, if at all, because it's not graphics editing, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes down to say, on the whole, it wouldn't be economical, she's saying, however, if all these applications were included as part of the operating system, it'd be incredibly large, take up a lot of memory, and be very expensive. On the whole, it wouldn't be economical because the average user would probably only use a small proportion of theirs. So she's done this whole little introduction about application software on her own, but she's been thinking about it, and then she starts going into why she used Word and the features that she's used in it, and some screenshots and access, and Game Maker, and Flash, which I didn't even know she used. I learned some new things reading this, some things that she did. She made this really cool game, by the way. It was called Ice Cream Dungeon Escape. That was her thing, because from her survey, her people all liked a food thing. And so she drew all these little characters. There were pieces of toast. The main character was a piece of toast. And he ran into different objects like peanut butter or molasses or things that would give him different powers. And he had a trusty steed that was a cat, and if you ran into the cat and then pressed the X key or the Z key or something, you could jump on the back of the cat, which would make you be able to get up to higher different levels. So I mean, she's just an amazingly creative person.
Is it in like the collection of examples? Your game?
No, I don't have it there, but I could put it there. I can put the executable code for a game. And then this was talking about Illustrator and some of the tools and techniques, and then operating systems. And what I liked about her operating systems, she's got a section on operating systems that talks about, key features and how you use them in Windows and Mac. I'm going to go down somewhere else. Now I'll never be able to find it again. I think I have a screenshot. She's embedded knowledge about how the operating system and the OS or the application software interacts. Different things like that throughout. You can actually tell that she understands things about the operating system. So Game Maker's application for Windows and Mac, but she's really talking about Game Maker. I chose to use the Windows version because I was personally more comfortable as well as experienced. And there are more benefits, as there are generally more updates. It's slightly more advanced than the Mac version. Also, executable files cannot be saved or run on Mac systems, so the Game Maker file must be transferred to the Windows, blah, blah, blah. So she talks about that, and you can see her justification here. Like, this is an excellence level justification. I think I have this as an example. Later, you know, some kids, I think, like my achieved kids said, I picked Microsoft Word because I know how to use it and it's really easy and it lets me make the words bold or something like that. But she's saying, here, you know, Game Maker is essentially, it allows you to create a game. It's in fact creating a piece of software application, creating a piece of application software yourself through the though the program has a user-friendly interface with drag-and-drop programming options, it can compile all the coding. You can run and save your game. In other words, you do not have to do any straight-out direct coding yourself, though there is a function to execute pieces of code, which she found out how to do and made some little things herself, which is much easier for the average user. It's probably, I'm sure, more convenient and efficient for people with more programming experience to use more complex application software, which will require more manual coding. But she's giving this whole, and it goes on and on and on about her picking on her thing, yes.
What frightens me is that if you've got a marker somewhere who's looking at this, and you've got Decile 2 students who can't possibly write like this, but they do justify
Yeah.
it, and they do, you know, how does that marker work? Does that marker think, well, I'm just going to read all this, I can see that they're competent here, and then I'm going to look at this one, yes, this one here is also competent here.
I think it's just that
or
they're
they look
just.
at that and go, excellence in mine, and go,
I think it's actually that I mean, she could have been writing all of this and it doesn't actually have any justification. It could be just waffle, 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 waffle.
Yeah.
I think it's the level of justification. So, and again, I put this one on here though to show you that she has come up with her own things. Like, this wouldn't necessarily be anything we took notes on, word for word. It's just things that she thought about and was listening to me say or reading about. So it's truly authentic that this was her own thinking, but she's also thought of reasons why, you know, why you would use Game Maker to create a computer game besides you'll see
That last one, but unless I'm not going to use programming expert, so I used it, so she's bringing it back to herself,
Right.
which is, I think, what it is.
right.
And she's a girl, which means she probably writes more words than
Right.
boys do.
yes, exactly.
But that's okay.
So you can see this is in the same class. Here's her, you know, she's organized it, and it's okay, but she said Game Makers is the application I use, which is specifically used for computer programming. It helped me to create my game Monkey Mania, and it enabled me to add sprites, turn them into objects, and add backgrounds. So she's said a little bit of a justification, but it's not, she hasn't really compared it, and she's really just describing what it allows her to do. And in some of the other ones, like I used Access, which allowed me to record the data and collect them. I mean, it's not bad. I think her justifications, they're not excellence level justifications. The reason that this person received an A overall is some things are good and some things are very weak, and I think holistically she sort of was in the middle.
What is it? It's describe, it's explain, it's
and
compare and contrast.
yeah.
That's where so describe is just to say
She's describing
she's described. That's
Yeah.
right.
why
She hasn't explained an awful lot as
This-
to why. And you'll
Yeah.
compare and contrast with the first one. Those are the three key phrases and your different levels.
See, and even this one, I actually, this would be what I consider a lower ND. This girl's came back as an A. Her justifications, weren't the same. That other girl's is really over the top. I mean, again, when I read it, I was just like, wow. I have two girls which we call over the top girls because they think that way. But I used the application software I used to create my game server is Word. I use this because it's an application designed to perform specific tasks which I needed in order to create my survey. Some of the tasks I needed to be able to do word processing. This allows you to be able to type, spell checking. She's kind of set it more for each one, a lot of the things that were available that allowed her to, the things that were in there. And her justifications are not at the same level. So, but again,
Do they have to be that is justified?
justify is excellence.
No, I mean, yeah, you said not justified at the same level.
Yeah,
Justified.
she has justified. Yeah, this is a lower excellence. I'm just saying you're worried that.
Yes.
I think this is justify at probably a more normal level of justify.
Right. Yeah. Right. See what you mean.
Like this. This program is good for what I need to do because vector graphics do not get pixelated when they're resized due to the fact that they do not render images on a pixel byte. Instead, the same square pixel would be made of only 4 dots. So she's kind of saying why she used Illustrator instead of Photoshop, which was made it pixelated. So it's not, each one she's given a justification for picking her apps, but probably not at the same level of work. But as you can see, again, when I'm looking at hers, I thought her file management was really good here. Good example of file management techniques I used when creating my game was that I named all of my sprites, objects, rooms, levels, sounds with appropriate names, so I knew exactly where everything was. And here, these are examples of clearly and appropriately named sprites, rooms. Oh yeah, for example, that's the phrase I wanted. The wrong sprite for a certain object, use my alien sprite for my spaceman object. So she's saying why she had to name it that way. That's in the merit criteria. You're supposed to explain the purpose and conventions of your file management and naming. So that's giving a reason for doing that instead of just, I put all of my things in my DT folder. And we'll go over that in the afternoon, but I think there's the difference between I did this, or lists of things, which is sort of identify and hopefully describe, and maybe explain and give a reason, which is putting them up to merit. And then at the excellence, it's the justify and the compare and the contrast more. We're getting up that level. I hope that you can see that none of these students actually turned in the exact same report with the exact same words or tools and techniques. So that's why I felt good about the whole authenticity. I didn't feel like they suddenly all turned in the exact same thing or all just took the notes that we had taken in class. I also knew that because they had to write about their own work, it was there.
I was just thinking what you've got the threads to date, and that list would
Right.
be what you could get off the internet.
Right.
But
Right.
that's important how I manage threads
my-
to my data.
Yes.
That's the key thing.
Right. And anything, like a few of them, they did try to turn in lists like that on their first, and that's where I just said, you need some personal examples, or how did I do it? Because that's what they tried to just turn in, some of those at first. Some of it was operating systems and a few things like maybe file type, or I don't know. There were a few areas where they just wanted to
Put a list in, but
Put a
they
list
actually
in.
haven't personalised it.
And as long as then they go on and say, so I did this.
Like that pair, I use .doc and .docx.
Right,
I use this file type because.
right. So whereas on the internet, you can get a whole copy and paste thing of what a doc is for and what a PDF is for. But here, right, I use a doc and docx for my word processing documents. I use this file type because it allowed me to continue and edit my work and my projects. I then copied them and made them a PDF file and I saved them in the student Dropboxes. This was because my final copy I needed to make so it could be edited. The PDF file allowed me to do that and makes all my font styles would stay the same. And then she talked about this whole the game thing, and she said I had to transfer the GMK file from my Mac to the Windows computer, as Macs are not able to run exe files. So, and we had gone over that over and over again. I said, if you want to make your game on your laptop with the Mac version, you can do that. But when you want to make it an executable, you're going to have to go into the Windows computer, transfer your GMK, and export it to an executable on Windows. And you can't go backwards. So we had this whole thing because the Windows version doesn't actually, the Mac version is 7 and the Windows version is 8.1. So once you've started editing it on the Windows version, you can't bring it back onto your Mac. So they had to learn about versioning and doing that. And that came through when she was writing.
Just as an aside, what you just said now, how are your students going to cope next year when they're all Macs?
Yeah.
When they're all Macs, I know. We're looking at, will we use Game Maker, or will we get the HTML version, or will we buy the, I don't know if there's a pro version for Mac. We're thinking about.
Oh, right. Okay. I was just thinking, hang on, you had to
No. I know. We are thinking about that. Luke and I are looking into different possibilities, and there's an HTML5 version of Game Maker, but it's a pay-for version.
Oh, right.
And so, will we have to buy a site license, or will we just pick a different language? Although this is a really good teaching language, and it's a good.
Having the two, the Mac and the Windows, there's a lot in here that's able to compare and contrast with that. What happens when you've only got Mac?
I know.
And talking about operating systems, and particularly you can't really compare and contrast with another operating system if you don't have it available to
Although
you.
a lot of them have Windows desktops at home, so they still know about that. But I
the ones
know
that have got the same here and the same at home.
this year we've done a lot of. Well, we've looked at operating systems, discussing operating systems for cell phones.
Smartphones,
Yeah, and just the differences between your operating system on your cell phone versus your
Would there be
computer
enough
and
though
so on.
if our students have Windows 7 at home, have Windows 7 at school, you can't really get them to compare different operating systems
In their own work.
in their own work. So how could they achieve the excellence level?
But
that
they don't.
component?
They actually don't have to compare it for the excellence level. They don't. The excellence criteria is how the operating system and the application software interact.
Cool, so you don't
This
have to
just
compare
gives them a
different-
little bit more insight, being able to go back and forth. And you can still do it as a teaching opportunity, though. Like when we're talking about operating systems, I was saying to some people at morning tea, we bring up command line interfaces versus GUI interfaces, and we talk about like having a Unix server that might be just running an internet server, and how those people who are the internet server wouldn't want all that overhead of having a GUI interface. So you can bring things in that way.
It's like a network operating system as opposed to electron operating system.
And the cell phone operating systems are good because they're just really single-use operating systems, like on the iPhone or the Android or whatever. As soon as you close one app, you can't multitask between them. So that's a really good. The other thing that some of our girls picked up on, we were saying, multi-user operating system. Someone said, "Oh, you mean when we play Xbox Live, and we play, or we take two-player PlayStation? We're both controlling the same thing at the same time." Oh yeah, that's right. And when they're all logged into Xbox Live and they're all controlling one thing, they sort of got that multi-user. Because those games are actually called I'm not a gamer. Lucas. Yeah.
Massive multi-user or something.
Yes. and so how they're going to have a multi-user operating system. So there's a lot of things that you can give them some background. But for them, for level 1, all they actually have to talk about is how they're using their operating system. But to give them that bigger perspective of operating systems, it's important that probably you talk about different operating systems so
I
they
think it's in the
understand.
programming work, they need to know the different ones. That's where it came up. When you're doing the two assignments that was in the heuristic one thing. Yeah, the 9174, I think. I'm trying to think, I know there was a way where we had to have 2 things as well. Yeah.
There were 2 programs, as in programming programs, not operating systems. It was like comparing C with Scratch. How similar they are.
Yeah,
how different they are.
They're different web browsers, not really different operating systems.
Yes, the whole thing, no, the operating systems is in this one. Yeah.
But yeah, you can still do that. But we are, those are good questions because Luke and I are already worried about our Game Maker because we love Game Maker. And he's sort of, oh, well, why don't we keep a lab environment as well, a Windows lab environment as well. I just don't like having its cost and space.
Yeah, but I mean your file bits come into all your other applications anyway. They don't have to do that one,
Right.
so in the other ones they do that.
And they can still do all the programming, but it's sad because they can do all the programming in Game Maker on the Mac version, but it doesn't let them compile it to an executable or an app, like on a Mac to make it an app. And I've read all the help documentation I can find, and they said they're not going that way. They've put their efforts into making this HTML5 version of it.
And I mean they've got enough stuff from other bits.
Right. Yes. So
And I
I'm
think
not.
That's important what you got is that
Yes.
they've actually got a lot of places to resource from.
Right. And so some of them didn't, some of the girls in their reports, they didn't even talk about everything,
No.
but they didn't need to talk about everything to get achieved. They at least had enough
To demonstrate
understanding. And I hope, we'll actually break down the standard after lunch, but I'm hoping that you can see by this, if you're doing this all year and you're doing it, I know it seems hard, it's a bit of pulling teeth sometimes during the internals like we talked about, but it actually helps you, in your marking for your internals. And then the external is not this big onerous research paper at the end of the year where suddenly, all right, write this research paper. And I think that was the approach with a lot of people, or where they felt overwhelmed by it, that suddenly we've got to get this external out, and we're going to, and there's no time to teach it, and we'll just give the kids the assignment and they'll go write it. And the kids said, okay, I know where I can find this information, I'll go Google it.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where...
This is better because you're massaging it in all year long. You're actually training them in the way they're to go. By the time the external arrives, as you say, the work's done. They just have to put it together.
Right.
And I think in fairness to ourselves, we've just got to realise we have a tough year.
Oh, yes.
Let's face it, and can we just get stuff done?
Survive.
But I think all credit to you guys that you did do what you did do. And we're learning as we go. I mean, we never said it was going to be right the first year. It's something that's ongoing all the time. So it'll get better as it goes on.
Well, that's the thing with teaching, isn't it? It doesn't matter how long you're teaching, you're always learning something new.
Oh, yeah.
And there are, like I said, there are little bits to each one of these that Luke and I have decided we're tweaking for this year. And like, for example, the operating systems bit, we started with that whole, we did the same thing. We started with the word processing, we did the file types. We didn't really do a big chunk of operating systems at the beginning of the year. We waited more until we got into the gaming to really talk about operating systems. And this year we've just started straight away, operating system, because we thought it's better. That's the one they struggle with, even though it's really not that, it's not that hard at this level. And since we have like 5 minutes before lunch, I think the red herring and the standard as I read it, is that single user, multi-user, in the explanatory note, multitasking real time, and that it just says may include but are not limited to, and people felt that the students had to write about every type of operating system that was on that list. And because students didn't have experience with every type of operating system that was on that list, that's when
A lot of the Google stuff.
a lot of the Google stuff came in. And I don't even know where that explanatory note came from, to tell you the truth. But I think it was just, I don't know if it came from a unit standard.
Pass.
I don't know, but
No idea. Could have
but
been-
it was
could
just,
have been
it
a
was
throwback
supposed,
to
I think it was just supposed to be
an
saying,
example.
those are examples of different types of operating systems that students could talk about.
I think it's also that NZQA speak. I mean,
Mm.
I know from having sort of contributed to them there, you write what you think, and then it goes through the NZQA speak people, and it comes back, and they actually have sometimes a different perception of what you're saying. I mean, let's be honest, we have a lot of terminology that we know about, but the people out there don't quite see it the same way. And when the NZQA speak comes back and say, no, that's not quite what we meant, and then we've got to do the other thing. So it's that may include, but is not limited to, is exactly that. And I know it's a case of they don't want us to use at least 2 or 3. No, don't have numbers. No numbers at all. So it's having to work within that, with those parameters. They've got their own set guidelines as well. But I think we've also just got to go back. Do you remember that about 18 months ago we had the NZQA people come and talk to us about designing an internal assessment resource? Do you remember? Still got those. And in fact, I went back to that now, just as an aside, over the holidays to do the level 2 ones in programming. And it's actually really good just to go back and follow those steps they do give you to help you. And I see that you've got a lot of that there. What are they assessing? What are they going to be? Where must they put the energies? What's not going to be assessed? And you can scaffold. I think what we've got to be careful of is too much scaffolding. I think that's where also some of this comes in. You give them too much, you can't see their own work, but just give them enough to guide them. You can do some of that here. Julie, just show us your merit one.
Yep.
And just as a in-between,
Yep.
between the excellence and the achieve.
Oops. I could right click it, but I'll just do that. This is one of Luke's students. And I think where she has merit, and she hasn't really, she has not discussed the interaction very well between her operating system and her application software. So that's an excellence criteria. She's talking about her application software, it's a vital part. And again, this is something, she starts out a little bit different than the other girls. She does say it's efficient. She says some of the key features that she's used. And she does give some justification here, like Microsoft Word on the other hand is a lot more useful and suitable for text editing and creation of documents, which are important, of recording how I program my game. One of the key features, she talks about styles. So she's at merit where she's giving some purpose statements for using these, and she's trying to justify her selection. But
so that would have come from her internal.
This would have,
almost,
yes.
Yeah, that's right there.
Yep, see, she's talking about, this is the styles where so this is purpose. If I needed to, I could base a style on previous main settings for what I'm trying to create. See, It is okay. I mean, these things are okay. If some of her justifications were then coupled with some of the other excellence criteria, but she's not quite there.
She has compared to Scratch with it.
She has compared it, and she's saying she's linking key features to the purpose, and that's that merit. Like I'm not just listing and giving a description of the key features, I'm saying why those allow me. And this isn't bad, because I reread these last night just to see the difference. One of these, GameMaker has other useful functions other than programming and building games. One of these includes graphics, which was good when I needed to resize or recolor sprites. In comparisons, GameMaker's editing system isn't as good as something like Photoshop, but for simple things like recoloring, it serves us. So that's actually a really good statement there. Those are some good statements that she's used, but I will go down. You can see that it's not quite the same as the excellence. She's given some really good things about her key features here and how she used it to make her dragon scales. She's kind of given some key features, but that's all she said about when creating my projects, the application software interacted, allowing me to access applications and running them so I could do it without the operating system. I would never have been able to create my game or use any of the applications. That was her sole interaction between the operating system and the application software, which is the excellence criteria. So that's one of them. I'm sure that's one reason she didn't get excellence. She has purpose, and this is definitely merit, because she's talking about purpose and conventions of file management instead of just this is what you should do. That's the identify and describe, that's the achieve, but when they're going up to some purpose and conventions and why it's important, that's getting into the merit there and giving some good examples. Folder structure, file compression. She talks about file compression.
There's quite a lot of computer science in here too.
She does do a bit of comparing and contrasting of file types, but she only did it on JPEGs and GIFs, so she didn't really talk about as much more detail in GIFs and JPEGs. So that's why I think she's merit. She'd be a high merit. She did the merit criteria, but she just didn't quite jump up into that excellence criteria. Here in her ethical, you can see this ethical, talking about offensive language, and that's just achieved criteria. But that's the difference. You can see where Bridget, in her excellence, they talked a lot more about the interactions between the operating system and the application software. Just a little bit more detail. I think her operating system software part definitely let her down. And some of her descriptions, they don't all have to be purpose statements. This is just an identify and describe. Yeah, can you see the kind of the step up in the level of reasoning and justification? She's probably started to go there on her apps, on select. Most of them attempt to do it on their application software because they know why they picked it. Yeah. But it's more of a level, and it's it's the file types, linking it to the purpose. Like I did this, it's better to say, I used a vector graphic so that because I knew it needed to be scalable. Yeah. And then I flattened it, or I had a GMK file so that I could edit it, and then needed to port it to an exe file. So it couldn't be changed. Yeah, to explain why, then saying, or an AI file that's just giving a description. An AI file is a vector graphic. which is scalable. Sorry, Phil and I are having quite a little private conversation here, but it's probably really important that difference, especially in that reasoning and justification and getting up to excellence. The standard does say compare and contrast file types for, I think it says for a purpose. For a purpose. Giving a list of a Word doc is a text document file. A PDF is used to make a flattened image. Where kids think that's a purpose, but that's really description, and it's sort of comparing and contrasting file types for different, it's compare and contrast a file type for a purpose. So, if you just say, an AI file is a vector file and it makes scalable graphics, you're describing it, describing that file type. But if you say that I needed to have my logo scalable in different sizes and I didn't want it to become pixelated when it was made larger, therefore I chose a vector graphics file type.
Yes.
And then
shows understanding.
it shows that understanding at that higher level, because they can just do lists of file types from the internet, or from, just generic lists of file types, or, a JPEG has millions of colors and is good for this. A GIF has less colors and is good for the, just saying those things. If they're doing if they're doing a digital media project, for example, I am going to, I chose to make my logo to GIF because it only had a limited amount of colors, and I wanted it to have a transparent background, which a JPEG didn't support. That's demonstrating understanding. Saying a GIF has limited file types and a JPEG supports millions of colors and is used for photographs. That's true, but it's not, and it's not that compare and contrast for a purpose. So what you're trying to get them to do is say, why did I pick this file type for that purpose? And why does it support that purpose better than an alternative file type? So that's what the standard does say. Okay, lunchtime.